This is my ranking of Souls-like games that I've played based purely on my personal experience. Each one is placed from masterpiece down to trash depending on how responsive the combat feels, how well the pacing keeps you on edge, and how much each fight rewards precision and quick decision making. Let's get straight into the list. The first Berserker Khazan starts as a brutal test where I kept hitting walls, especially in the early bosses that demand near-perfect timing and patience. I had to slow down, study attack patterns, and accept failure as part of learning instead of forcing progress. The combat feels fast, but very punishing, with each weapon changing how I approached fights, and sticking to one style helped me improve steadily. Boss fights became the main highlight as I learned their moves and slowly turned frustrating losses into controlled wins. The mission-based structure feels a bit basic, and exploration is limited, but the core loop stays engaging because of how intense each encounter gets. It took time to click, but once it did, the challenge felt rewarding in a raw way. This one settles into my great tier. Black Myth Wukong opens with a strong impression, and the fast combat kept me active in every fight without long downtime at all. I had to balance dodges, attacks, and resource use, which made each encounter feel sharp and controlled instead of messy or random. Boss fights stood out the most, pushing me to learn patterns and react quickly, while still giving enough room to adjust my approach in real time. I liked how abilities and transformations added variety without making things confusing, so I could focus on timing and positioning during intense moments. The world looks incredible, and exploring it felt rewarding, even without a clear map at times. Some technical issues did break the flow here and there, but the core experience stayed strong. This one secures a spot in my excellent tier. Wukong Fallen Dynasty places me in fast, aggressive combat where timing matters more than anything else, especially with its heavy focus on deflecting attacks. I had to learn enemy rhythms quickly, because missing a parry or reacting too early often led to getting punished hard. Once I understood the system, fights began to flow in a satisfying way, letting me chain deflects and attack smoothly during intense moments. The spirit system added a nice layer, making me decide when to stay defensive or spend it on strong moves for pressure. I liked having multiple ways to approach tough fights instead of being stuck with one method every time. Some parts, like the story and enemy variety, felt weaker over time, but the combat stayed engaging throughout. This one claims a spot in my great tier. Stellar Blade gives me fast, reactive combat where timing and precision matter in every fight, especially when dealing with long enemy combos and sudden attacks. I had to stay focused on parries and quick reactions because mistakes were punished hard if I got careless during intense moments. Once I got used to the rhythm, fights felt smooth and controlled, with a good mix of offense and defense working together naturally. The different skills and energy systems added depth without making things confusing, so I could adapt during tough encounters and switch approaches when needed. Boss fights stood out with strong designs and constant pressure that kept me alert the whole time. The world looks great and has plenty to explore, even if the story and characters feel weak. This one rises into my excellent tier. Another Crab's Treasure feels different right away, with its bright style and lighter tone, but the fast combat still kept me engaged through most encounters. I had to focus on dodging and timing, though it felt more forgiving compared to other games in this style. The shell system stood out the most, letting me switch abilities and defense in creative ways that changed how I approached fights in each area. Boss fights were fun and memorable, even if they weren't as punishing, and the variety kept things fresh throughout the journey. I also liked how the world stayed playful while still adding small emotional moments along the way. Some camera issues and simpler mechanics did show up at times, but they didn't take away much from the experience. This one earns its place in my excellent tier. Remnant II blends fast gunplay with Souls-like pressure, and I had to stay alert as fights constantly mixed shooting, dodging, and ability use at the same time. The combat felt smooth and responsive, letting me switch between ranged attacks and close moments without breaking the flow. I liked how each world felt different, with new enemies and layouts that kept things from getting repetitive. Boss fights were a major highlight, often pushing me to adjust my build and approach instead of relying on one tactic. The build system added a lot of depth, giving me many ways to shape my playstyle and experiment with different setups. Playing solo or with others both worked well, adding variety to each run. This one stands at the top as a true masterpiece tier. Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy Origin gives me fast, aggressive combat with a strong focus on switching jobs and chaining abilities together during fights. I had to manage my resources carefully, especially MP, while mixing attacks, spells, and defensive moves to stay alive in tougher encounters. The job system stood out the most, letting me experiment with different combinations and find what worked best for my playstyle in different situations. Combat felt flexible and satisfying once I understood how to extend combos and react to enemy pressure consistently. Some parts, like the story and characters, felt confusing or weak for a long time, and the loot system became messy with too many items to manage properly. Still, the action kept things engaging throughout the experience. This one sits in my good tier. Rise of the Rōnin features fast sword combat where timing, counters, and choosing the right style matter in every fight. I had to stay sharp with deflects and manage my stamina because enemies could quickly turn the fight if I made mistakes. Once I learned how to use counters and switch styles mid-combat, fights became much more satisfying and controlled during tougher encounters. I like the variety in weapons and approaches, which let me handle situations differently instead of repeating the same strategy every time. Some missions and side activities felt stretched out, and the constant loot became overwhelming after a while. The open world offers interesting moments, but also too much clutter that slowed the pace. The core combat kept things engaging through most of the experience. This one lands in my good tier. Nioh 3 brings extremely fast and technical combat where I had to stay focused on timing, stance switching, and managing my stamina in every fight. I kept adjusting between different combat styles, and learning when to play aggressively or defensively made a big difference in tougher encounters. The addition of a faster playstyle alongside the traditional system gave me more freedom to approach enemies in different ways. Boss fights pushed me hard, forcing me to learn patterns and react quickly instead of relying on simple tactics. The open areas added more to explore, though they didn't always feel unique over time. There were moments where the systems felt overwhelming, especially with all the gear and options. Even with that, the combat stayed deep and rewarding throughout. This one earns its place in my great tier. Lies of P presents fast, precise combat where I had to rely on timing, parries, and staying aggressive to keep control of every fight. I learned quickly that hesitation led to punishment, so I stayed active, mixing blocks and counterattacks to recover and push forward during intense encounters. The weapon system added a lot of flexibility, letting me experiment with different combinations and find setups that matched my playstyle in different situations. Boss fights were a major highlight, with strong designs and patterns that pushed me to improve and react faster each time I faced them. The world felt dark and memorable, and the story kept me interested more than most games in this style. Some difficulty spikes felt uneven, but overcoming them made each win feel earned. This one rises into my masterpiece tier. Darksiders 3 brings fast hack-and-slash combat where I had to pay attention to enemy patterns and time my dodges carefully to stay alive. I couldn't just attack without thinking because enemies punished mistakes quickly if I got careless during fights. Once I understood their behavior, combat felt satisfying, especially when landing well-timed counters and chaining attacks together. The different forms and weapons added some variety, letting me switch abilities based on the situation and explore new paths. Boss fights could be tough and sometimes frustrating, especially with longer runbacks after failure. The world design felt simple, but it kept things focused without unnecessary distractions. Some parts like the story and visuals didn't stand out much, but the action kept things engaging enough. This one fits into my good tier. Wuchang Fallen Feathers brings fast combat with a lot of flexibility, and I had many options when building my playstyle and switching between abilities during fights. I liked experimenting with different skill combinations, especially how weapons and abilities work together in combat situations. The world design felt strong, with connected paths and areas that encouraged exploration and careful movement. However, the experience felt uneven, especially with difficulty spikes that came out of nowhere and boss fights that dragged longer than they should. Some encounters gave very small openings, which made progress feel slow and sometimes frustrating instead of rewarding. There were also moments that felt cheap, breaking the flow of combat and learning. It had good ideas, but the execution didn't always hold up. This one sits lower in my mediocre tier. Sekiro Shadows Die Twice pushes me into fast, skill-based combat where timing and precision matter in every single fight. I had to unlearn habits from other games and focus fully on deflecting, countering, and staying aggressive instead of backing away. Every encounter felt like a test of reaction and control, especially during boss fights that demanded near-perfect execution. The posture system changed how I approached combat, rewarding constant pressure instead of slow damage. Movement also played a big role, letting me stay mobile and approach fights from different angles using vertical paths. There were no easy shortcuts, and improvement came purely from learning patterns and reacting better each time. Each victory felt earned through skill alone, without relying on builds or gear. This one stands at the very top in my masterpiece tier. Lords of the Fallen brings fast, responsive combat where I had to balance dodging, attacking, and managing my positioning during constant enemy pressure. I liked how smooth the combat felt, letting me react quickly and adjust my approach depending on the situation. The dual realm system stood out the most, adding a unique layer where I could shift between worlds to solve paths and deal with enemies differently. Exploration felt rewarding because each area had secrets and alternate routes that encouraged me to look deeper instead of rushing forward. Build variety also gave me freedom to experiment with different playstyles and weapons. Some performance issues and weaker boss fights did hold it back at times, but the core gameplay stayed strong. This one earns a place in my excellent tier. Star Wars Jedi Survivor features fast, responsive combat where I had to balance parries, dodges, and different stances during fights against varied enemies. I liked switching between combat styles, which added variety and let me handle situations in different ways, instead of relying on a single approach each time. Movement felt smooth, with abilities that made traversal more dynamic and opened up more ways to explore each area across the world. The mix of combat, platforming, and puzzles kept things fresh, and the larger environments gave me more freedom to move around and discover side content. Some performance issues and predictable story moments held it back a bit, especially during longer sessions. The combat and exploration remained strong and engaging across the journey. This one finds its place in my great tier. That's how these Souls-like games line up for me after going through all of them. Some lean fully into tight, punishing precision, while others mix in different systems, but each one tests your skill in its own way and keeps you learning with every fight. Thanks for watching.